Hey there, Sports History fans. Arnie Chapman here from the Sports History Network to share with you an awesome announcement. Now dig on this. 4 of our amazing podcasts have clinched spots in the final round of the Sports Podcast Awards, and we need your support to take home the trophy. First up, we've got Basketball History 101 driving the lane in the Best Basketball category. Then on deck, we've got Orville Mulligan Sports Writer. He's cracking up the competition in the Best Sports Comedy category. Marty's Illegal Stick is dominating the ice next in the Best Hockey category. And last but not least, we have Wrestling with Heels on powerbombing its way to victory in the Best Wrestling category. Now, again, we're counting on you to cast your vote and help out these incredible podcasters secure their well-deserved recognition. It's super easy. All you gotta do is head over to the dedicated landing page. That's at sportshistorynetwork.com/vote. Again, that's sportshistorynetwork.com/vote. Now, let's take another look at sports yesteryear with this episode brought to you by, of course, the Sports History Network.
This is Craig Colquitt, former punter for the University of Tennessee Volunteers and the Pittsburgh Steelers, and you are listening to Total Sports Recall Podcast, a part of Sports History Network. Now, here is your host, HARV ARONSON.
Welcome to Total Sports Recall. Today, I welcome back a return guest, Mr. Bob Swick. I've known Bob for a very long time. He's a friend who has also has a podcast titled Gridiron Greats Podcast, but more importantly is the fact that Bob is the editor of the Gridiron Greats magazine, a quarterly publication that focuses on pro football history, sports collecting, and I'm a contributor for Gridiron Greats magazine and honored that Bob has given me the opportunity that dates back many years to write for him. Before we bring Bob onto the show, let's review his background history. Gridiron Greats magazine editor and publisher Bob Swick has been collecting football cards since 1965. He has written about football cards and memorabilia since 1990 for several major sports collecting publications, including Sports Collectors Digest, and had his own column, Turning the Pages. He self-published Bob Swick's Football Times in the 1990s. He has been interviewed in Tough Stuff, The Giants Report, Packers Report, and Beckett Football Monthly magazine. He's also been a contributor to the Beckett Annual Football Price Guide. Bob took over publishing Gridiron Greats magazine in 2008 at issue number 23 and has been publishing it ever since. Bob also collects programs, yearbooks, media guides, ticket stubs, pocket schedules, and team photos of the Green Bay Packers, of which he is a shareholder. He also has a complete collection of mainstream football cards set from 1948 to 2015. Bob's also a member of the Professional Football Researchers Association and brings his expertise to the magazine in the form of his love for all things football related. He has a BA degree in journalism and an MS in economics, brings a unique focus to the niche of football memorabilia and history. Bob and his wife, Brenda, currently live in Southport, North Carolina. He has taught business and economics classes for over 41 years on a part-time basis for numerous colleges and universities, and currently teaches online at the University of Cincinnati and Florida Institute of Technology. So welcome back, Bob. And I think I said North Carolina. Is it South Carolina?
Yeah, that's North Carolina. Southport,
it is
North Carolina.
Okay, very good. So, Bob, you have a new issue that's been published, and I believe it's already available. And if not, when does it become available?
Okay, right now it's in the mail to our subscribers. However, you can go online. We have our PDF version available. And if you want to order the print copy, just order it online, and it'll be mailed out next week to anyone interested.
Excellent. So, Bob,
it's our issue number 83. To give you some perspective, we did take over the magazine at issue 23. You were one of our first early writers many years ago. We're going back quite a while, and
yes.
You were on our original podcast many years ago with the book you wrote when we talked to you about it. You've been on our podcast several times. So I appreciate you having me on and giving me the opportunity to talk about our latest issue.
Well, thanks, Bob. And I didn't realize that was the very first podcast that I was on. I thought
Yeah,
maybe you
it was
had.
one of the first. It was not the first one. It was one of the first ones we had on.
Okay.
We had, yeah, probably within the first dozen or so that we had, because we were on. We're still on twice a month, and
Uh-huh.
back then it was twice a month. It was the same deal. So
So this
quite
should
a
be
few years.
number the 50th magazine you've published.
It's the 60th. It's actually the
60th. Okay.
61st issue right now.
Okay, great.
So we're at issue number 83, and I don't know where the time went in any way, shape, or form.
I'm telling you, the years fly by. Well, Bob, give our listeners some insight into what's inside this latest edition of
Well,
Gridiron Crates.
we have a great issue coming up. We have two stories written by San Francisco 49er historian Martin Jacobs. He wrote a tribute to Russ Francis, who sadly passed away in a plane crash. That man's life was so unique, it's not even funny. I do remember Francis when he played for the Patriots back when we lived in Connecticut many, many years ago. Believe it or not, Russ Francis lived in Madison, Connecticut, and he was friends with my nephew. And he would go to a local seafood restaurant in Branford, Connecticut, where my nephew got to know him. Great guy, real down to earth, had no ego whatsoever on him whatsoever. Gone way too soon. Sad,
Wow.
sad. He was a guy who lived life to the fullest, active in so many different things, active in life, great career in football. Martin got to know Francis when he played for the 49ers during the 80s. It's a great story. And he also wrote a tribute to the late, great Dick Butkus. And Butkus, as we know, really needs no explanation
Yeah.
for his career. What a great career that man had. And so those are two stories we had on, sadly, another two deaths in football of people, players of our eras and our time. And, sadly, those guys are passing. We also have a great story by Greg Tratner on the first championship game, Akron at Buffalo, which took place, believe it or not, in 1920. And
Wow.
Greg got some beautiful pictures and pieces of memorabilia that he included in the article for that. We also have, along with the Buffalo tilt, we have Gary Cobb, who has the Buffalo Destroyers Museum, which is an incredible
Hmm.
collection of arena football items, in particular from the Buffalo Destroyers. And in this issue, he's gone into depth for the Buffalo Destroyer packet schedules. Sadly, packet schedules are going by the wayside in the effort to go green and eliminate paper, yada, yada, yada. But he has preserved some great pieces of arena football history. And
Uh,
arena football history and arena football is still very popular in our country. And a lot of fans are very, very very, very strong with the teams that they follow, the locations that they're in, which are not necessarily uh, good areas to have a team. But for an arena football league team, it's a great location. They get great fan bases, and if anybody hasn't seen an arena football game in person, I highly suggest it. It's just a phenomenal explosive game, action all the time. You're literally hearing the calls on the field. You're hearing the huts going off by the quarterback, so on and so forth. So it's a great sport to pick up and look at and follow.
yeah,
Uh,
here in Jacksonville, they have the Jacksonville Sharks, and they have a
yep.
very,
Okay.
very strong following. And I actually did go to a game once, and the only reason I went was because Dallas Baker was playing for the Steelers at one time, a wide
Okay.
receiver.
Yep.
And so I wanted to go and have him sign my terrible towel, which is you can see up on the wall behind me.
Yep.
If you can see it, there's a little scribbling up there. That's Dallas Baker's autograph. So yeah, arena football was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a great sport. It's family friendly. It's affordable. The guys playing are guys playing for the love of the game. I've seen, on TV and in person some great games over the years. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Connecticut had a team just for one season, which I went to a few games there, and it's just a great sport. And I appreciate Gary preserving the history of arena football, which is very in depth, believe it or not. And there's a lot of pieces of memorabilia one can collect from that. So
Yeah.
it's a cool sport. We also have an article by Bruno Balazar, who mentions a lot of the old football leagues in a poem that he wrote. Pretty cool piece that he wrote. He is an Atlantic Coastal Football League historian, believe it or not.
Wow.
He has followed the Pottstown Firebirds in depth. He's a historian of that team. Great guy, great knowledge of the ACFL. I go back to the ACFL with the Hartford Knights back in the 60s. When I was a kid growing up in Connecticut, I used to listen to Hartford Knights football on WTIC AM radio 1080, 50,000 watts out of Hartford. And it was a great time, great games. I never got to see an ACFL game in person, but I did follow them in the newspapers and on listening to the radio reports of that. We have an incredible super collector and his collection on a gentleman who collects Washington Redskins / Commanders items. His collection is beyond belief, and we got some great photos of it. And he hopefully is going to be a guest on our podcast. We got to just get our times good with him due to his work schedule. But his collection is incredible. I decided way back when we took over the magazine, we wanted to feature individuals' collections. I think it's important to see other people's collections, the passion they have for the team, for the item, so on and so forth. And we've been steady with this since issues in the early 30s for the magazine. And I have just viewed some incredible collections over the years. I got to see a few in person over the years at the same time. I'm just so thankful I've been able to see these collections over the years because I've heard about them. I going to shows, I would hear guys say that, I collect this and this, and I got a run from, 1921 up, so on and so forth. And I really felt it was needed to feature it. Sports Collectors Digest many years ago would do on occasion collectors, especially in football collectors collections, but they didn't do it to a large degree. And when they got bought out, the whole bit, they cut out a lot of those articles. Beckett really has never covered it over the years, once in a great while. So I feel it's important that at least 4 times a year that we look at these collections. And I keep getting amazed of the emails or the phone calls I get from people and say, hey, you should talk to this guy. I mean, he has an incredible collection. And yeah, we have a longtime subscriber to Gridiron Greats magazine. He sent me a text and he said, Bob, you gotta check this guy's collection out. It's incredible. And I said, okay, and contacted him, and I was just blown away. I never knew that, never heard of the guy before, and never knew of his collection before.
Wow. But
it's just an amazing story that he tells with regards to his collection. So he's featured in this collection, in this issue. We also have a great article on the 1977 Topps Mexican football set written by Mike Bonner and Carl Lamondola. This is the second part of the article that they wrote several issues ago, and it ties in a lot of the more very hard to get rare cards in that collection. And for someone who only has a handful of the cards from that collection, I have a couple Green Bay Packer cards from my typeset collection of Packer cards. That set is just very difficult to put together, and you got to have a good wallet to put it together at the same time. And I rarely see them at shows, and I've been going to shows and doing shows for almost 40 years now. I remember seeing it. I saw a few at a show. I would buy them, and the dealer, in most cases, well, I don't even know what they are, so why don't you give me $1 for the card or whatever, which I wouldn't because I knew they were rare and never really saw them. And as the years went on, we found a lot of information on it and learned a lot about it. So that's an interesting article they wrote. It gives you a lot of good background on the set itself, and you can learn a lot from it, and maybe take a stab at collecting a few of the cards or your favorite team out of that set. And We also have John Spanos from Behind the Table column. Again, another perspective on being behind the table as a dealer, trends in the hobby, so on and so forth. He has an interesting article with a comparison of the coin hobby and the card hobby as far as, where prices are, so on and so forth. The past few years, we've seen a massive explosion in the prices of football cards, especially those that are graded. I'm not big on grading. I don't own many graded cards in my collection. I really not big on them one way or the other. And I'm still shocked setting up at a local show here. Young guys plop down $400 or $500 for a graded card without hesitation. Wow. And then they're trying to figure out, well, I don't know if I want to spend $10 on your magazine. I don't know if, that type of thing. So you got that kind of mentality in the market, but it is what it is. Yeah. And then we also have a excellent book that I highly recommend that was written by a mutual friend, this pro Gridiron team, the 1903 Franklin All-Stars, written by Darren Hayes. Great book, very interesting, about real early history of the game. I highly recommend it. Next, but last but not least, is your incredible article on three gentlemen who are a father and two sons who are punters in the NFL who all won Super Bowl rings. And I'm going to hand off to you and give us a little background on your writing that article.
Sure. And the article is on the Colquitt family, the first family of punting, you might want to call them. And Craig and I date way back when I was the president of the Steelers fan club here in Jacksonville. For one reason or another, I can't even remember, I reached out to him and we started exchanging emails. And then we just lost touch for many, many years. And so last year, when I got the podcast going, I said it would be interesting to get Craig on the show since we did have some kind of relationship back then. And I didn't have his email anymore. I didn't have any phone numbers, but I did find his home address. So I sent him a letter, and sure enough, a week later, he writes me an email, and we got on the phone, and I asked him to come on the podcast, and he did. And so after our conversation, people can go back in my history of podcasts and listen to that interview, but it was really good. And of course, he has two sons, Dustin and Britton. One played mostly for Kansas City, the other for Denver. Both of them won a Super Bowl. Craig Colquitt, of course, won the Super Bowl with the Steelers back in the late 80s. A little early 80s. I think he was on the 79-80 team for the Steelers. Right. And so he won two Super Bowls. His two sons have won a Super Bowl ring. So that makes them a little unique because, as everybody knows, the Manning family with Eli Peyton and the father Archie, Eli and Peyton obviously won the Super Bowl. Eli never got the chance to do that playing for the Saints. So the Colquitt family has that unique perspective that they have a father and two sons that all won Super Bowls. And so they will be making a return visit. Hopefully that is the plan, to be interviewed on one of my future podcasts. Craig tells me it will be the first time that the three of them have ever been interviewed in one sit-down interview. So that should be pretty cool. But yeah, I enjoyed writing that. All three of them have a very nice history in football. Dustin and Britton's careers were a little longer than Craig's. And I actually want to ask them when they sit down who was the best punter of the three. And I statistically looked at it, and I think if I had to say which one was the best, Dustin's stats are a little better than the other two.
Right. I noticed that too. And, the one thing that popped in my mind when you sent the article in, why would not the NFL capitalize on such a great story like that of a family of three punters, all three won Super Bowl rings? And number two, more importantly, why doesn't some advertiser pick up them with a great story in contrast to the numerous Manning commercials that we see for everything from A to Z?
Absolutely.
With the families, and that latest oatmeal commercials, to say the least. So, and then it just truly amazes me. I mean, here's a really feel good story.
Yeah.
You interview the guys, you write about them. The story's never been told anywhere. I mean, I looked online for there is no articles on these guys whatsoever. And
Wow.
what a great story it is, though. It's a celebration of football, a family
Hmm.
of punters,
Yeah.
number one. And number two, how these guys really were good punters at the same
Hmm.
time. They weren't, a one season guy that went,
Hmm.
played 6 seasons for 6 different teams and filled in for 4 games when somebody got injured type of thing. They weren't those types of punters. They have longevity in the league at the same
Yes.
time. So great story. I mean, I really appreciate that you writing that article because it's a story that definitely needs to be told about them.
Well, I appreciate you publishing that, and I was honored to do the story. And just for fact, they're all University of Tennessee volunteers, grads,
Right.
and they are huge, 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 huge Tennessee fans still to this day. Total Sports Recall is sponsored by Mira Artistry, where you can purchase beautiful fine art photography and abstract art. Contact Mira Artistry in regards to commissions and availability of the pieces on her site. She would like to create something special for you. For the photography and art lovers in your life, Mira Artistry has the perfect gifts for you. Visit Mira Artistry at www.miraartistry.com. That's MERAARTISTRY.com. MiraArtistry.com.
And again, talking about University of Tennessee, the one thing I also noticed too is a lot of these guys, especially the older players, really hold their respect and their allegiance to the colleges they graduated with, so they are
Mm-hmm.
fans of them for the rest of their lives, so on and so forth. And it's great to see that,
Mm-hmm.
especially with all three of them going to Tennessee, all
Yeah.
three of them,
Mm-hmm.
they're still following the teams, they still support them, so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a great
Yeah.
story. This is just really, I really am glad the story is told for them at this, and hopefully, they get a little more recognition, which they should get.
Yeah,
And again,
absolutely.
we realize kickers and punters are forbidden in the Hall of
Mm-hmm.
Fame for whatever reason, because there's a lot of prejudice against them that they're
Mm-hmm.
part-time players, so on and so
Right.
forth. I like to see some sports writers go out there and kick 200 punts daily,
Mm-hmm.
practicing before the game type of thing.
Yeah.
So it's a that is underrated and has been overlooked over the years, with
Mm-hmm.
the exception of Ray Guy. But
Mm-hmm.
there were a lot of guys, a lot of great punters in the NFL, the AFL over the years, and they deserve recognition, and it's a great story for the family.
Yeah,
Great story.
and I was just going to mention Ray Guy because growing up, I got to watch him punt, and he was just an amazing punter.
Right,
I mean, he
right,
was
right.
second to none. You talk about allegiances too. One of my past guests was Terry Hanratty, former backup quarterback for the Steelers, and being a Notre Dame product, he has his own podcast now as well, Terry's Huddle, and he just speaks about Notre Dame all the time.
Yeah,
He bleeds Notre Dame gold.
and that's good. And
Yeah.
that's a respect shown to the college and to the program that he was in, and that's what it's all about to a
Hmm.
large degree. One other article that I did write, I went back a couple issues ago, and I reintroduced my Turning the Pages column that I used to write for both Sports Collectors Digest, and over the years I wrote numerous articles on publications because I think publications are way overlooked in our hobby. And I'm talking about programs, media guides, football annuals like Street and Smith's, football yearbook, Sports Illustrated, all magazines that relate to football. Some of the great football magazines of the 60s, Dell Football, so on and so forth. So in this issue, I wrote about I had a couple guys ask me if I could write about Street and Smith football annuals, and I took it from 1940 to 1962, which were the years that Street and Smith only issued one issue for both professional and college football. And I talked a little bit about it. I was surprised to see, and I revisited pricing again, The first issues, which are the most difficult issues to obtain, have really gone down in price, whereas the other issues through the late 40s, 50s, and up to 62 pretty much have remained the same. The reason why 1940, 41, 42, 43, and 44 are tougher to find, those were war years. A lot of them, they didn't print as many as they did later on in their run. And at the same time, a lot of those magazines got recycled for war drive, paper drives. So there are not a lot of them out there one way or the other. I'm just surprised there's just not greater demand for them. So hopefully I can revitalize some interest in those magazines because they're a great historical perspective of the game, both the college game, the early professional game, and in some issues they had the CFL, Canadian Football League, in there too, which is again rare pieces of history of that league at the same time.
Well, before I get to what I was going to ask you next, one thing I wanted to ask you about is back in the 80s and 90s, I was up in New York, and I used to go to trade baseball card trading shows all the time. They were so popular, and I don't see a lot of that down here now. I mean, do we still have these shows going on?
Yeah, there are shows out there. I was kind of surprised when I moved down here to North Carolina. In Connecticut, we had a steady shows, but they started over the past 5 years to combine with coin shows, so there were coin and card shows. Down here, there's like a little circuit of football card shows, which are done quarterly. So you can go every quarter, every 3 months, to pretty much 3 to 4 different shows to find cards and memorabilia, so on and so forth. What I find interesting today, and again, I started setting up at shows back in 1982, 83. Today, it's mostly graded cards. It's a lot less memorabilia, a lot less paper goods, so on and so forth. So when I set up, for example, at the Wilmington show here, which is about a half hour from where we live, people just look at my stuff and they have no clue what they're looking at. So I spend most of the show explaining to them what they're looking at. And, I get a lot of nice compliments, and I'm trying to nudge them. I said, well, if you really like it, spend the money and buy it. It'll be a nice part for your collection type of thing. And again, I see, what I call them the backpack warriors, the guys walking around with their backpacks, buying the graded cards, putting in their little card case, so on and so forth. It's almost like a religious cult putting these cards together and collecting them and so on and so forth. But I get it. I mean, that's just a hobby today.
Sure.
And football, to me, is up there for certain items and certain cards, but for other items, there really is not a great demand for them. It's not like the old days of the what you're talking about, the 80s and 90s, where there were so many dealers, so many card shows. There was a card show literally every week, and you could find anything and everything at those shows. We still have the National Sports Collectors Convention yearly. This year it's going to be in Cleveland. Last year it was in Chicago. Chicago was the biggest national show ever. Wow. I have never been at a show where every conceivable part of that Rosemont Convention Center was filled with collectors, dealers, card companies, card breaking companies, which is the big thing. They buy a box of cards and they break the cards, break them up the wax packs, and try to get the more important cards out of it, so on and so forth. It was like a zoo there. I have never seen more people in my life at a national, and I've been going to national for years. And it was just too overwhelming for someone older like me who's a longtime collector, because you really don't have the time to really see what you want to see. Sure. Because it's so vast. If you went there from Wednesday and ended up on Sunday, you still would not have seen everything in the show in the time frame of 4.5 days. That's how much stuff was there.
Well,
so
I was going
to
say, when I used to go to those shows, I mean, if you're a historian buff like myself, there's so much fun. Even if you end up not purchasing any of these shows, just to see these things that are dated, there's so much history to them. I really used to enjoy those shows, and of course, I'd always end up buying something. But it's just there's so much history in these shows, the way they used to be. I don't know if they're still the same. And then we used to have people come and sign autographs at these shows too. I remember going to one with Bill Skowron of the Yankees was there. So yeah, it was pretty neat.
Many years ago, to really date myself, my buddy and I we set up our own card show in actually Wallingford, Connecticut at uh, uh, the VFW hall because my father was a veteran, and we
Mhm.
had Spec Shea, the old Yankee pitcher who lived in
Mm.
Connecticut, come down and sign for us, and he was a hoot telling us the stories through the whole show, and it was a great experience. And we had a lot people come get his autograph, talk with him, and he was very approachable. You know, you
Mhm.
didn't have to pay to get his picture with him, so on and so forth. He would, be. And in those days, we didn't have cell phones, so people would bring their cameras or their instant
Sure.
cameras and have your picture taken, have their picture taken with him, and he was fine with that. So it was a good time for all. Today, it's much more corporatized.
Hmm.
Guys only sign, if you want their number, it's extra money. If you want to, Hall of Fame
Hmm.
something. The old timers, they just sign. They're happy
Yeah,
that you remember them, so on and so forth. But
absolutely. No,
I
it's,
personally won't pay for somebody's autograph. I refuse to. I have a lot of autographs in my collection, and
mhm.
I've been very fortunate um, for the connections I have that I've been able to get autographs from these guys. And I always say I like it personalized to Bob. They know right away I'm not a dealer trying to hawk their autograph to make money
Mhm.
on it. I want the autograph for my own personal collection.
Absolutely, and especially what they charge now just to have you sign an
Oh yeah.
autograph.
Yeah.
um, yeah. So, Bob, do you have a favorite past issue?
Somebody asked me that a few weeks ago. It was funny.
Really?
And I said honestly, I love them all. They're really a lot of work and effort and goes into each one of them.
Hmm.
And it's interesting because years ago we had on our podcast Josh Evans from Leland's, who started Leland's. He passed away sadly,
Mm.
and he was one of our most interesting guests on. And he was talking about our magazine because
Hmm.
they're a big advertiser in our magazine. And he
Wow.
said, what you guys got is a boutique publication. He said, you are uh, a specific publication to a specific group of collectors, historians, and people who
Mhm.
enjoy football. And he said, I think that's really nice to see in the hobby. You're not the Barnes and Noble type where you see us at every Barnes and Noble and we get, 80% of the magazines returned to us because nobody's going to pay the price for them on the newsstand type of thing.
Mhm.
So we are a boutique publication. I don't have a favorite issue. I enjoy them equally, and again we put a lot of time and effort into it. Guys like you, who I can count on every issue for another great article. I just truly appreciate it. And it's more of a work of the love of the game and the love of the memorabilia and preserving the game's history and memorabilia, which I feel is very important for the hobby.
Yeah, and I meant to mention before when you were talking about Russ Francis' story, Jerry McFarland, who is also in the Sports History network of ours. I had him on as a guest, a repeat guest last week, but he's a big Titans fan. We were talking about Frank Wycheck, who
Mhm.
tragically passed away as well, and just like Russ Francis, gone before his time, but in the craziest way, he had fallen down in his home and hit his head, which
Wow.
ended up putting him in a coma, and he passed along. So 2023 was a rough year for some
Yeah.
former players.
Yeah. Yeah,
There's
and sadly, again, the guys from our era, the '60s and '70s, they're dying off. My legends from the '60s Packers are pretty much all gone.
wow,
It's sad, and again, it's life. Inevitably, we all
exactly.
pass.
Hmm.
But we got to try to preserve their stories, their legends, their memorabilia. I think it's critical for the game. And again, not to pick on the NFL, but I will. The NFL does not do a good job on their pre-1970 history. It
Absolutely.
seems like as soon as the AFL was merged, the history of the NFL is 1970. Well, it's not.
Hmm.
It's 1920 to 1969, and a variety of leagues all incorporated into the NFL that we know today.
Yeah. And years ago, when I was running that fan club down here, we had a fundraiser, and we had a bunch of former NFLers come in because they were running an organization, and I don't know if they're still running it, trying to assist NFL veterans from yesteryear, because the NFL really does not help these guys, and it's a real tragedy that they don't. Because a lot of these guys are hurting, they have medical bills, they can't afford it. Obviously, they didn't get paid the millions and millions of dollars these guys do today. I don't even know if they have a decent pension fund for these old-time players.
No, it's really a sad situation. There's a lot of old-timers that were really hurting. And again, I'm not going to get into the specifics of a few that we try to help out, but it's a sad. I mean, it's really sad. You're a multi-billion-dollar organization. Help these guys out. Pay their medical bills or whatever. Give them a medical plan so at least they can that's taken care of.
Yeah,
instead of treating them like garbage. I mean, it's what it amounts to.
It's a travesty. It's absolute travesty because the NFL makes so much money. You cannot tell me for a second that you don't have enough to help these guys out who help build the foundation of your league that you're now prospering off of. It's pathetic.
Mike Ditka's Gridiron Assistance Fund has done a lot. And I know he does a lot privately that he doesn't want any publicity on. Stuff like that. Those guys remember their guys type of thing. But again, what happens when Ditka goes? I mean, who's going to carry that on type of thing?
Yeah.
It's sad.
Well, within your magazine, Gridiron Greats, Bob, have you ever had former players that were interviewed for articles?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Yeah. So any past issues of Gridiron Greats, have you ever had any former players that were interviewed specifically for those articles?
Over the years, I've only had a handful. We've had a couple Packer guys. We had our director of illustration and artwork, Jared Krause, good friends with the Forrest Gregg family, and he got on many occasions to interview Forrest Gregg before he passed and preserved a lot of his stories, which I think was very, very good and very necessary for the hobby itself. We also had an interview with Jerry Kramer, very down-to-earth guy. John Spano interviewed Jerry, and as John said, they talked more about fishing than they did about football, which I thought was pretty cool. Yeah. And we've had a couple other guys over the years, more lesser players, quote unquote, than the major stars, trying to preserve their history at the same time. Jared seems to find a lot of obscure players and their stories over the years, and he's written about them, trying to keep some of these guys' stories alive, so on and so forth. And it's appreciated by the families of those players because they didn't really get the publicity they got over the years, and it's sad. That's it.
And didn't Jerry Kramer write a book once about the Packers? I recall reading one.
Yeah, and again, Instant Replay was the damning book by Kramer of the tell-all book back in the 60s of Lombardi's Packers. And over the years, he said, I never anticipated getting the reaction I got. I basically just wrote what was going on.
Yeah.
And he always used to say, along with a lot of other Packers, Lombardi treated us all equally, like garbage, like dirt, but Lombardi knew how to push everyone's button correctly so that they would perform. And they realized, as the years went on, Lombardi had a deep love for him, and that's why he did what he did, because he wanted to win. Winning was the most important thing to him.
Yeah, I remember as a young kid, I read that book. I know I did. It was excellent. It was an outstanding book. And now you mentioned the name Lombardi. I have another story for you. When I was running that fan club down here, we were sitting there one day and somebody came over to me and said, you know who's in here watching the game? I'm like, who? He goes, Vince Lombardi's daughter. I'm like, no way. And I said, you've got to introduce me. So I went over and met Susan Lombardi.
Okay.
Very nice lady. And she had the Super Bowl ring, one of Lombardi's Super Bowl rings hanging around her neck. And I was just like, wow, we're sitting in royalty here. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
Vince Lombardi is football after all. The Super Bowl trophy is named after him, and it was very neat to have met her.
And a story about Lombardi, which I don't think a lot of people realize, and I've said it numerous times. He was very fearful of his financial future,
Hmm.
and that's why he started negotiating with the Redskins, because the Redskins were willing to basically make him set financially for the rest of his life. So the Packer board of directors, after they found out what happened, they said, "Well, why did Vince come right to us and say?" We want, we'll give you whatever you want. We don't want you to leave the organization, so on and so forth. And he never did. He was afraid to say it to him, but he talked to the Redskins. The Redskins gave him a good package. And sadly, he didn't last long with the Redskins, but the Redskins still took care of the family afterwards. They were true to their words, and he achieved the financial security that he was always wanting. Because again, he was not at the time where he was making, six-figure contracts for being a coach type of thing. He was pretty much, a very, very well-paid coach, but it was never something that he thought he was going to be able to be set for life. And then at his age, when he left and became the general manager, which he didn't like, uh, that he was going to be financially set for the rest of his life. It was a sad story, and I've said this to several people over the years. I really believe Lombardi never would have gone sick if he had stayed with the Packers.
Wow.
I really believe that. Even though he was a chain smoker, I get that.
Mhm.
I really believe that if he hadn't put himself through the turmoil of having to leave Green Bay, which he never wanted to, start all over in Washington, which he accepted the challenge because he was a true coach. I don't think he ever would have gotten sick, and I think he burned himself out of coaching. But he should have done something else other than the general manager's position. He should have been like an overseer of the Packers, and I think he could have, seen a lot of different things differently, and he probably would have been uh, live a longer life than what he did. Sad
Yeah.
story in a way. Sad
Mhm.
story in a way.
And you made remarks about how the Redskins took care of him, and that's, I think, a difference between the league itself and ownership, because
Right,
some of these
right,
team owners do a great job of taking care of their players. And of course,
right.
I'm speaking about on my Pittsburgh Steelers, because
Yeah,
the Rooney family always, always, always going down the line from Art Rooney Sr. down to who owns it now, Art Rooney Jr. They take care of their players, past or present. And they've had that reputation of really caring about the players themselves.
yeah,
As a matter of fact, I heard something on a podcast the other day about Le'Veon Bell coming back just to visit the team, and despite turning his back on the Steelers a few years ago, they accepted him in the locker room like he was one of them. He's
yeah,
and their theory there is that once you're a Steeler, you're always a Steeler, no matter
yeah.
what. So
And
very,
that's the way
very
it
cool.
should. That's really the way it should be for any NFL team and any NFL player. And the NFL has to realize, the players also realize it's a big business, and they have to protect their financial interests too.
Sure.
So if after 4 or 5 seasons they're with the team and the team says, "Hey, listen, we can't afford you anymore. We got to let you go," there should be no hard feelings. It's a business. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, you and I work for a company, and then after 5 years they say, "Okay, you're not going to get any more money or whatever, or thank you for your services, blah, blah, blah," or you move on to the next company. There's no
Yeah.
different than an NFL player. It's rare to see, as we both know, any NFL team having a player on their team their entire career.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of, in my opinion, hurts the history of the league
Sure.
and of the team. But it is an economic factor.
Mm-hmm.
I just point to both Favre and Aaron Rodgers because I'm prejudiced toward the Packers. Aaron, I don't understand for the life of me what the point of Aaron Rodgers was going to the Jets. I mean, he's got enough enough income for the
Mm-hmm.
rest of his life, one way or
Yeah.
the other. He wants to prove he can win a Super Bowl. He had
Mm-hmm.
ample opportunities on the Packers not to lose the
Mm-hmm.
championship game
Mm-hmm.
and go to a Super Bowl and win a couple rings. And
Mm-hmm.
again, I still say they should Rodgers should have had 3 rings, not one.
Yeah.
So, he's with the Jets. He hurts himself after 4 plays. It's comical in a way to watch what happened.
Yeah.
It's par for the course of the Jets' history.
Mm-hmm.
And now he really thinks he's going to be back next season, and they're gonna turn around and take a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I find that hard to believe, But
Yeah.
again, that's the reality of the league.
And now he's having this dispute with Jimmy Kimmel. So
Yeah, yeah, and that's ridiculous too. So
it's
and
hilarious.
I'm not a big fan of these in your mouth, 24/7 news,
Yeah.
sports news shows. I really don't
Mm-hmm.
watch them anymore.
No.
I'm bored with them.
Mm-hmm.
I just as soon watch on YouTube, the game and review type of thing
Yeah.
of the game that was played rather than listen to these guys go over the
Mm-hmm.
same play 77 times and talk about the same thing 77 times, and you don't learn anything more about the
Mm-hmm.
play after 77 more times, discussing it type of thing.
Yeah, is it Pat McAfee, the show that Aaron Rodgers was on, I think?
Yeah, yeah,
They
yeah,
have televisions on at my office, and they play Sports Channel throughout the day. And I saw Pat McAfee show come on the first time, and I was like, I can't watch this.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I
yeah,
refuse to watch
exactly.
this.
We go to once in a while to a place for lunch, and they have it on, and then I asked the guy at the place, I said, "You got anything else on? You can." He
Yeah.
says, "I got two channels here, golf or this guy." So he says, "I got guys that want to watch this. I got guys that want to watch golf." I said, "At this stage of the game, I'd rather watch the golf than listen to this guy,
Oh, yeah.
bellow, type of thing."
He's
So
he's
uh,
kind of obnoxious, to be honest with you.
he is
Uh,
very, very.
yeah.
I mean, just picture either you and I doing our shows like that. I mean,
Oh, no.
people would be laughing,
It would
seeing
never
something.
happen. It would
Yeah,
never
and it
happen.
wouldn't.
Uh, you're talking about players switching teams, and well, it made me think of Hines Ward, because when he retired from the Steelers, he had opportunities to go play elsewhere, and he said, "No way." He says, "I'm a
Yeah,
Steeler, and I'm retiring a Steeler." So that was very honorable for him, and he gained a lot more respect by saying that.
exactly, exactly. And I give credit to any guy who won't play those extra couple seasons at the end of his
Mm-hmm.
career to try to say that he was still playing,
Yeah.
but retire as a. And
Mm-hmm.
again, sadly, I really wished Favre uh, retired as a Packer, not play with the Jets, not play with the
Mm-hmm.
Vikings.
Mm-hmm.
He went on those 3 seasons. I get it. You can't walk away from 80,000 people screaming your name when you walk out on a
Sure.
Sunday. But at some point you got to just say, hey, I did what I did. I had a great career. I'm going out on top.
Yeah.
And too many guys in the NFL sadly go out on the bottom rather than going out on the top.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, but it's just the way it is.
Yeah, and some people put a negative on Franco Harris's career. Unfortunately, he also passed away, but a negative on his career because when he left the Steelers, he played one more season in Seattle,
Yep.
and a lot of people scratching their heads. Why didn't you just retire? Because he
Yeah.
only did play one season, and he didn't do much that season either.
Right. Right.
So I get your point there. Well, what would you tell Bob about two other sports collectors out there about the hobby of sports collecting? And as you can see behind me, there are a former classmate of mine and a guest on the show, good friend Mitch Mansfield, came down to visit, and he gave me all these bobblehead dolls from Pittsburgh, and they're all Pirates. And I'm grateful to him for that because they all have a story behind them. And then he also sent me this little collectible. This is a seat to Three River Stadium, the back seat from Three River Stadium, which I spent much time in. So many games, football and baseball. So very, very grateful for Mitch giving those to me. But what would you have to say to other collectors about this whole business?
Well, I always say collect what you like. If you like something, if it's a media guide, if you like the printed word of the game, if you like the program, if you like the ticket stubs are very rare now because everything's on your phone for tickets. So they're going to be they're really gaining popularity as far as the collectible is concerned. But collect what you like. Don't miss your mortgage payment to try to buy something for your collection. Use common sense. Don't follow a trend. If you like something that's odd, collect it. There's no reason why you can't. I know so many different collectors over the years. Some collect just pennants. Some just collect stadium seats, as you have. Some collect the bob. There's so many different things you can collect. Some guys collect buttons. there's so many different things to collect. Collect what you like. If there's something that really, spikes your interest, collect it. If it's a card set, collect it. Don't be afraid, not to collect it. Realize that you can't collect everything because you can't, now, unless you have an unlimited source of income. But more importantly, have fun and learn about the team, the player you're collecting. Enjoy the history of them, and that enriches your collection so much by collecting it. I've always prided myself on my football card run from 1948 to 2015 because it basically shows me the history of football cards from that time frame of these 92 different sets that I've collected. At one time, I was one of the few people in the country that actually had a collection that large of football card sets. Over the years, I've learned many more collectors have that run, and I think that's great for the hobby because we preserved the history of football cards through that. And I just took a great attraction into collecting that. I still love magazines, media guides, programs, books, so on and so forth. I love the printed word. I love the physical piece of paper. I'm not big on reading my media guides online, so on and so forth. But again, a lot of teams are just going online with all their printed stuff, and it's sad because it's tough preserving history that way.
Yeah.
So again, if you're a beginning collector, collect something you really like, have fun with it. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to email people like myself or call us and ask, what's going on with this? What is involved in this, so on and so forth. And hopefully you'll gain a greater appreciation of that piece of memorabilia, and therefore you would want to collect it in the future. We preserve things for a short period of time and then they're handed on. We can't
Sure.
we can't line our boxes with our collections when we go. There's no purpose in that whatsoever. So we hand it off to the next generation of collectors. And hopefully that's, especially someone like myself that has an advanced collection, as the years go on, I'll be able to hand it down and or sell it and get it into the hobby for other collectors to enjoy.
And you took the words right out of my mouth because if I ever collect anything, it's going to be because there's some kind of history behind it. And as a matter of fact, all these collectibles you see behind me, I've taken pictures of them because I do want to do a YouTube video for my channel and show each one of these bobbleheads and tell the story behind these guys.
That's great.
I thought it'd be really interesting. And, like you had kind of mentioned before, given our age, we were lucky. We have a lot of history to remember, to look back on. The current generation, I mean, these guys really aren't setting historical things that are going to be remembered 20, 30 years from now.
Right.
But
and that kind of scares me because again, when you and I are in our 80s, we're going to say, well, gee, remember the playoff games of 24? Not really.
Yeah,
exactly. We knew one we couldn't watch because it was on pay-per-view, basically because they put it on Peacock TV there because they wanted to make more money on it type of thing. So, we'll probably still be talking about the 60s and 70s 20 years from now as compared to the 10s and 20s that we should be talking about. And it's what it is. That's it.
Absolutely will. And when I retire, I wanted to write a book about historical moments. And believe you me, there's not going to be any from probably 1990 on. It's going to be all prior to that because that's where the real history is. So it's just hard to fathom that. And because a lot of it is that these players switching teams. And, they don't have a chance to set history because they're going from one team to the other.
Right. And it's, and look at the Hall of Fame today. I mean, it's diluted as far as, these NFL guys that they pick for the Hall of Fame. I'm saying, why? I mean, I don't even know how they come up with these guys after a while. I mean, it doesn't make sense,
Yeah,
I just assume see them like a season. Well, we're not going to pick anybody. We're going to pick a couple of players from the 20s and 30s who have been going up for how many years, and review their accomplishments in the history of the game type of thing.
Sure.
You
I
know,
mean, we've been crying for years that L.C. Greenwood belongs in the Hall of Fame. What are you
right,
waiting for? This guy
right,
absolutely was an integral part of the Steel Curtain,
right,
and he
right.
belongs there. And I have a strong argument for Hines Ward as well. I think he belongs in the Hall of Fame. He keeps making, excuse me, semifinals, but he hasn't gone in yet, and I think he
Right,
deserves to be there. And they just keep
right.
passing him by. Who knows?
And to me, it's just because they probably ticked off a writer somewhere down the road, and that writer made sure he informed everybody on that committee. I don't want this guy. You know, he said a bad word to me back in
Sure.
whatever. You know,
Mm-hmm.
at 3 o'clock in the morning when he was coming out of a restaurant or type of thing. It's garbage. It's not necessary. It's
Yeah,
not.
well,
These guys, the Hall of Fame really needs to get their act together as far as who they're
sure.
putting in. They really
Uh,
do.
I agree. And then I've heard this discussion that, well, they don't want to put Hines Ward in because there's already too many Steelers in the Hall of Fame.
That's garbage.
It's
That's garbage.
silly. So back to your magazine, Bob. Are you accepting any more contributing writers at this time?
If you have an article idea, I highly recommend just contact me. We'll talk about it, and it'll be good to go. You can contact us through our website, gridirongreatsmagazine.com. There's information there on how to contact us. If you're not a subscriber to the magazine, you can subscribe online also. And if you're interested in any back issues, you can buy those back issues there. We also offer PDF back issues and current issues.
Yeah.
So if you just want the PDF, and it's becoming very popular now, we have PDF from issue 35 on
Wow.
that you can order, and you can be sent the PDF and take it from there.
Very cool. Well, I have every single issue over here to my left since I started writing for you. Every one of them is just sitting right here, ready to look at again. What's the future hold for Gridiron Grades, Bob?
Well, I take one issue at a time. I keep going so long as I have material, and God willing, I'm healthy enough and Brenda's healthy enough that we can put it together. We have 4 times a year, we have a crunch, what I call the crunch 10 days here at the compound when we're putting the magazine together. We're finalizing everything. A lot of work goes into each magazine in our layout, proofing, so on and so forth, getting it to the printer, proofing it with the printer, getting issues here sent to us, getting all the subscriptions out, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of work involved, but it's a hobby and it's a labor of love. And again, we're trying to keep the word of the game, the history of the game, the history, more importantly, of the memorabilia of the game alive as long as we can.
Well, I hope it continues for a very long time because not only am I honored to have the opportunity to write for you, I love writing for your magazine. It's a fantastic magazine. I encourage everybody to subscribe, especially if you're a historian. It's just a really great piece of work. One last thing we're going to talk about, Bob, is you've been invited to a roundtable discussion to take place following this season's Super Bowl, and I'll be hosting that along with 5 other Sports History Network podcasters. We're going to review this past season once it's all said and done. In short, can you summarize the year and your thoughts of the 2023 season up to this point?
Well, it's been a very interesting season to me. I call it the season of mediocrity. There were a lot of teams that were either 1 or 2 games under 500, 1 or 2 games over 500. We see those teams in the playoffs. We only saw a couple of really superior teams like the 49ers and the Ravens being a big surprise to me. I had the pleasure down here to watch every Carolina Panther game since that game is on every year. I was at one point going to write the coach and give my suggestions, saying misplays, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
I decided against it because I felt he wasn't going to listen to what I was going to say, if anybody. But all kidding aside, really a season of extremes. I kind of like seeing what I saw with the Packers and Jordan Love, since that's my favorite team. Love showed a lot of composure, both in victories and in losses. Again, there were some poorly coached times during the Packers season. I think they could have won a couple more games easily. I really wish them well against the Cowboys. I don't think it's going to end nicely for them. But the biggest surprise I have is the implosion of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Wow, yes.
Here was a team that was supposed to was given the Super Bowl trophy before the season started, and as they were winning, they were pumped up week in and week out by the media, and they imploded. And here was a team that is really, I don't know what happened to them, and they're going.
Yeah.
I really can't see them going far in the playoffs at all. I also found it interesting seeing the Patriots saga of another bad season, which basically cost Belichick his job, which is understandable. It was time for a change. His decisions were not working anymore, so on and so forth. I was a little surprised about Pete Carroll, but then again, I'm not, because as we both see, the big trend to younger coaches in the NFL, guys our age and in their 70s, the Andy Reids in the league are going to be few and far between in the future, which is sad because they have a lot to offer as far as football knowledge is concerned. But in any event, I'm really looking forward to that roundtable because I think it's going to be great talking about and hearing different perspectives as far as the league is concerned and teams are concerned. I'm bringing incredibly now a new view rather than my typical tri-state area teams.
Sure.
Giants, Pats, and Patriots that I watched for how many years. Now I'm a Titan, Panther, and to a lesser extent Falcon, Jaguar, Bucks viewer down here, which I find kind of interesting because I haven't really seen these teams depth to depth. But I did need to endure a full season of the Panthers football to see the just incredibly poor play of the team and poor decisions.
That's a rough year for Carolina.
Coaching and the players. I mean, it's sad to say the least. And it's funny when you go into grocery stores down here, you see these huge Panther beer displays everywhere. And I am just shocked. And I'm getting close to one of the stores we shop at. I'm going to ask the guy, can I get that? They got a full fake Panther player display thing. I said, can I get that? Or you guys, somebody else wants it, or you throw it out. And I would probably say, I'll pay you to take it out of here if you want. Okay.
Yeah, it was a terrible year. A couple of points about these playoffs. I actually think the Eagles are going to lose to Tampa. That was my pick in that game. I just think that playing in Tampa, they're going to win. And then the Mike McCarthy connection with Green Bay and playing Dallas. And I've heard talk on the radio that if he loses this game, he's going to be fired.
Yeah, he will be fired.
There's no reason he should lose that game. And of course, my Pittsburgh Steelers. Nobody is expecting them to win that game. I'm picking them. I'm telling you, they are going to surprise. They're going to open up a lot of eyes. Just because TJ Watt's not in the game does not mean anything. And Mason Rudolph is riding such a hot hand right now. And the way that Najee Harris is running the ball, it's going to be a very good game for the Steelers. I think I really like their chances.
I think they're going to be a lot of nice games or good games to watch. I don't think there's going to be really many surprises. I do agree with you with McCarthy. I always liked Mike McCarthy. I thought he's a player's coach. He's a nice guy. I actually have a little correspondence with him when I wrote to him. Real nice letter he sent me, his autograph, so on and so forth.
Oh, cool.
It's interesting. I wrote to Matt LaFleur, congratulating him as being a head coach. I've written to him a couple times. Never received one piece of
kidding.
Art of any type of anything from him. And that kind of annoys me as a Packer shareholder and as someone who, has done this for years, writing to Packer coaches and getting nice responses, getting handwritten letters from like a Mike Sherman, a Mike McCarthy, so on and so forth.
Wow.
These guys are, I don't know, what happened to the diplomacy between the fan and the coach itself, I don't get it, but it is what it is.
Exactly. Well, if the Steelers do pull off this victory tomorrow, it's going to be interesting because the following weekend they'll be playing in Baltimore, and they've already beaten them twice this year, so that'll be fun. So, Bob, it's been an honor, like I've said, to work for your magazine. I look forward to writing the next article and hope our professional relationship will continue for years to come. I'm sure one day I'll make another appearance on your podcast. If you want me to come on, I'd be more than happy to do that. Do you have any final thoughts or words for our listeners? And just reiterate again how they can get in touch with you to get a subscription to this great magazine.
Well, first, I want to thank you, Harv, for all your hard work you've contributed to the magazine. It's truly appreciated. as I said, it's a labor of love, our magazine, and it's guys like you that help us keep going. Again, check out our website, gridirongreatsmagazine.com, for subscription and back issue information, or if you want to contact me on anything you're interested in I'm writing about or wanting to see an article on. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, I want to thank Bob Swick for joining the Total Sports Recall podcast. Until next weekend, when I have another podcast out there, I bid all of you a great week, and be sure to reach out to me on the show, either on Twitter at TSRHARV59 or by email at totalsportsrecall@gmail.com. I also have a channel on YouTube by the same name, Total Sports Recall. As a website, you can find me at www.totalsportsrecall.com. For Bob Swick, this is Harv Aronson.
The contents of this podcast do not represent the opinions of others and are solely the opinions of Harv Aronson based on his experience, knowledge, and research.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I wanted to thank you for stopping by to listen to another episode here on the Sports History Network. Our podcasters are passionate about uncovering and sharing sports stories from yesteryear. And if you didn't know it already, we have over 30 shows across the network covering all sorts of sports history topics. In fact, here's a glimpse into one of our awesome podcasts here on the network.
Do you wish you knew more about the 100 seasons of the NFL? You're in luck because you found the Football History Dude podcast, where each episode is a journey back in time to learn about the rich history of the NFL. From the founding of the league in an auto showroom, all the way to what it is today, America's favorite sport and a behemoth of an industry. My name is Arnie Chapman. Football is my passion, and I want you to come along with me each week to explore the yesteryear of the gridiron. So hop on board my DeLorean and let's get this baby up to 88 miles per hour.
How about that? I bet you're super hyped to go listen to that new podcast, right? Well, to learn about this show and all the other podcasts on the network, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com/podcasts. Again, that's sportshistorynetwork.com/podcasts. Head over there today to find your next favorite sports history podcast.